On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
The connection with the natural world and this earth-based tradition is what Judaism is. And when we put it aside, we're actually losing part of the essential heart of what Judaism is about.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ralph Benmergui. Welcome to Not That Kind of Rabbi. Well. Tu B'Shvat tomorrow. Or maybe it's today. You know, I always have that thing about, does it start at night? Does it start during the day? Which day is it? Does the calendar know that it starts at night? But nonetheless, we shall discuss Tu B'Shvat in this fine edition of Not That Kind of Rabbi. My guest today is someone who, we end up interweaving at this point because we've both been to the same place, but for different reasons. I was ordained as a mashgiach in the spiritual direction program, 3-year program at something called Aleph. And you can look it up. Aleph is based in the United States. We have an Aleph Canada as well. And they provide for cantorial ordination, rabbinical ordination, pastoral rabbinical coordinate, which is new, which is a thing that has been created there for people who are more interested in pastoral care, chaplaincy, things like that. And then, of course, the rabbinic stream, which is not an easy hill to climb. It's not like, geez, I think I'd like to be a rabbi. There are, by the way, organizations out there that, one that I saw out of New York that would make you a rabbi in a year. And don't. I'm going to say, not a good idea. So better that we do this a different way, which is to actually put in the work, which is what my guest today has done. I'm so happy because he's a Canadian and lives in Toronto at this point in time. And I just love the idea that Aleph Canada and Jewish Renewal, which we'll talk about in this section of the show, they're really underrepresented in this country. And it's wonderful to have somebody in the biggest city and the biggest Jewish city, frankly, in the country, who can plant the seeds for renewal here. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Aaron Rotenberg to the program. Rabbi, how are you?
I'm doing well.
How does it feel to be called rabbi? Because you just received your ordination, your smicha, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, just a few weeks ago. It's still very fresh.
So what was that like?
Yeah, it felt like a very meaningful culmination, as you were pointing out, was a big hill to climb. So for me, it took 4.5 years, but really I've been in Jewish learning spaces, feels like my whole life. So
give me your origin story without any capes or flying involved, but give me the origin story of Aaron Rotenberg as a Jewish being.
I grew up in Thornhill, and I was in what felt like a Jewish bubble. I went to, for those listeners that know, Thornhill is already a very Jewish suburb, and I went through the Jewish day school system. And unlike some of my other peers, I really loved the Jewish studies. My parents both wanted me and my brothers to have more Jewish education, but didn't grow up with it. Both of their parents came over from Europe after World War II. And there was a little bit of a disjunct, and it felt like my generation, me and my brothers, were trying to get something back on track.
Why? Because your parents didn't engage in Jewish life in a deeper way?
They did, but they didn't receive a full education. I think that they both wished that they had more. And I think that we had the sense that our family does have a rich Jewish history, but something about the immigrant and refugee experience that my grandparents had here, the priority was fitting into Canadian society.
Yeah, there's a real tension there, right? I mean, between stranger in a strange land and wanting to be true to what you believe you come from. So I hear that. It's not an easy path to, and you want your kids to succeed in this new milieu. So you have to, when in Rome, as they say, right?
And I think that we'll get to it, but I think this tension of succeeding and finding our way as individuals and as people in this so-called new land is at the heart of Jewish renewal, and I think was part of the project that Reb Zalman, who maybe we'll talk about, who was the founder of the movement, was trying to figure out, also having survived World War II and the Shoah and making it to America and trying to figure out, how does Judaism take root here? So I ended up getting connected to NCSY and the Orthodox world, and ended up for my first year of undergraduate studies at Yeshiva University in New York, which was a different Jewish experience than what I was brought up with.
That's a pretty immersive experience. What made you decide to take that dive?
I think that I was looking for something serious, and I was I had signed up for and was maybe going to spend a year studying at Yeshiva in Israel, but my parents were a little bit hesitant about that. I wasn't sure if it's what I wanted, but it felt like, Yeshiva, but in New York, felt more like the right mix. I was becoming more observant at the time and keeping Shabbat and wanting to have a fulsome community, and I was finding that in Orthodox spaces.
So was the pull, it doesn't have to be one or the other, but what elements were involved in terms of the seeking that you were doing? Was it more the cultural, the spiritual, the sense of tribe? What was it that you were looking for and trying to seek out?
I might not have termed it spiritual, but I think it was more along those lines. I was looking for meaning in my life, and I had questions about what was important, and it felt like my world around me kind of offered answers that felt a little bit dull. Like, find a good job, find a partner. That is where meaning is. But I wanted more and deeper answers.
Where was God in the conversation in your head as you were growing up and going out?
Honestly, a little bit in the background. It felt like God stood in as an answer. Is there something meaningful? Yeah, there's God out there, and here's some like philosophical arguments that make things make sense. God revealed the Torah to our people, and now we have the Torah, and we can move on from there.
So what to you is the difference, if there is one, between spirituality and religion?
I probably use them interchangeably. I think that religion has this sense for people that there's ritual expectations and feels like doing things by the book, and spirituality has this association with expanded heart and ways of knowing that can be more, whatever the opposite of less by the book is, more free. But to me, they're both needed. I think that actually religion and spirituality contain both of these poles of something grounding and connective and something free and exploratory.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of it in terms of the four, in the Kabbalistic idea of the four worlds. And I see people yearning for God as Yetzirah, as the heart center, and the people who find great comfort in religion in the Bria. It's like, well, look, there's rules and we do it and we discuss it and it's intellectual and it's all in the service of getting to the top of spirituality at the end of it. But they seem to have different parts of the brain that they engage in certain people. I don't know if that was your experience.
For sure. And I hope that we can speak more about the Four Worlds framework, which I think has been very meaningful for me. I think that maybe I mean this other framework of keva and kavanah. When I think about religion and spirituality, or at least that's how they're understood. Keva being regular practice, and kavanah being intention. And actually, they both need to work together.
Right. So you went to yeshiva, then you didn't go to yeshiva.
I went to yeshiva, and it wasn't the exact right fit. So I didn't stay there
Check,
all that
please.
long.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, I left with a positive sense. Um, and I took a leave of absence to try out something else. I went to the Jewish Theological Seminary,
Okay.
a conservative
Yeah.
institution just a few blocks south. I was enjoying my time in New York, and that felt like more of a fit for me and opened me up to academic study of Judaism, which was different, and a more pluralistic environment of people who were, including myself, Orthodox at the time and Reform and exploring, and that milieu of people living together in the dorms, also in this case of all genders, of all different sorts of backgrounds, I found really engaging.
So you were cross-pollinating at that point. You were in a hive.
Yeah, it definitely felt like there was a lot of cross.
And what were you getting from all these other bees that were bumbling around?
A sense that there's lots of ways to be Jewish, that it wasn't only following a certain kind of orthodoxy. People had, and you know, in some ways, I still find it rare, even around here, people with a strong conservative approach, which is a different way of looking at halacha and Jewish life, but very serious. And that being a totally valid and beautiful way to look at their lives. And people who had a strong cultural connection and who were spending hours and hours of their lives studying Jewish texts and weren't looking for something religious or spiritual in their studies and still found a beautiful and valid connection to Judaism.
So JTS.
I was there for 5 years in total.
Wow. But you didn't become a rabbi out of it.
I saw the rabbis and was like, that's not me. That's not what I want.
Yeah, well, tell me about that, because I mean, it's the name of the show, but why wasn't that you?
So really what was happening at JTS is I was also moving in a direction that felt less, I don't know how I would put it these days, at least less observant. And it felt like, oh, actually, if this Torah is not written by God, maybe I need to shift my way of relating to it. I know that's a little bit vague because it sort of was changing and in flux. And I think maybe that's part of it, is that I saw my Jewish life as being part of a journey. And I looked at rabbis and thought, oh, they're the people that know what they're doing. They tell you how to do it. And I think I found some comfort in that in my more Orthodox days, being like, oh yeah, here are the people that know things and can tell you things. And I wasn't interested in that. I was I want to be in a seeking mode.
Yeah.
And that felt more enriching.
Where do you start to bump into Reb Zalman and Jewish Renewal and Karl Bach and all of that? Where do you start to get into those areas?
In seeking out options for rabbinic training while being committed to staying in Toronto, Aleph came on my radar because the program allows for distance learning with a couple of meetings each year in person. And it was more that just the practical pieces of the model that worked for me.
Going to Aleph is going out of the mainstream ways of becoming a rabbi. There's a whole way of thinking in Renewal. What made you decide that that's what you wanted to do and not, I'm going to, do Hebrew Union and do Reform or Reconstruction, or what made you decide that you were going to go that path? Because it is a different path.
So maybe in part it's because how it was described to me by my mentor and friend, who's the other Renewal rabbi in Toronto, Rabbi Shalom Schachter. And when Rabbi Shalom described, I asked him about the Aleph program, and he described Renewal not in those terms, right? Not that it's by definition outside of the mainstream, but actually the role of Renewal is to bring renewed spiritual energy to any community. Could be to the conservative community. I think Rabbi Shalom was working at Beth Tzedek at the time, a big conservative shul here in Toronto. And that appealed to me, that actually there's ways of, bringing renewed energy, and it doesn't have to be its own separate thing. It actually can be part of.
What does that mean for somebody listening? Renewed spiritual energy. What does that mean? How do you do that?
Maybe the words are vague, but I think that people sense it when you go to, it could be any Jewish place that one might frequent, and it feels like, oh, we're just doing the same thing again.
So yeah, because
Which,
when you just said that, I thought of the classic example for me in my head is always you go to a synagogue, you go to shul, and if the kids aren't doing it, you're doing it, but you do Ashrei Yoshrei Vetecha, Ojehalu Hasela, Ashrei Hamshkachlo, and everybody knows it, and Adon Olam Adon, like everybody does it. But then you get into the renewal world and you get Chef of Gold out of New Mexico, just slowing it all down into not even a complete sentence, just Ashrei Yoshvei. And in doing it at that speed, I found there was an ability to capture a certain spiritual energy that was because I would moved out of the sense of being in a rote format where I know it. And the other part of it was I could stop you in the middle of almost any Hebrew prayer in a synagogue if you're a congregant and say, do you know what you're actually saying right now? And they'll say, no. And I always say, it doesn't matter. You're singing with a group of people, even though you're singing, in essence, gibberish, because you don't know what you're saying. You're still saying it together, and you've been saying it since you were a kid, and there's a whole spiritual energy to that. So that's what I got out of deciding that, well, this is the way to go. What for you were the things that made you think, I'm going to spend years in a rabbinic program at this place?
yeah, so I appreciate what you're bringing, Ralph, because you've been through Aleph land.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because I'm thinking I'm not sure exactly who the listenership is, but I also want to keep it, tied and accessible to folks here. But yeah, there's also experiences that I've had in Aleph that, yeah, let's not do it the same way and let's explore different and new things, which is also something that I'm found myself being open to when I wasn't to begin with. But I feel like even within the regular Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha and that same approach,
Mm-hmm.
there is different ways that can be expansive in itself. One of the highlights for me of my time in rabbinical school was doing the Davening Leadership Training Institute, or the DLTI program, with our shared friend and teacher, Rabbi Sean Zevet, a program that he started with Rabbi Marsha Prager and Chazan Jack Kessler of blessed
Blessed
memory.
memory. Yes.
And the way that program works is people get up and lead a part of the service, and then we relate to it as a lab. So somebody goes up and says, okay, we're now starting Mincha, Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha, Od Yalelucha Salam. They finish the service, and then we open it up and said, hey, how did that go for people? And right, somebody might say, oh, that's a tune that really is familiar to me from my childhood. I love that tune. And somebody else says, well, I've heard it so many times. Is there a way that you can breathe some life into it? Can you maybe try it again, but remember what the words mean? And then we
Mm-hmm.
workshop it and then try different things, which is just, it feels almost basic, but in no shul or davening space that I've been to was there any workshopping of leading prayer.
Right.
It's just, oh, this is how we do it, because this is how we do it.
So does that little Orthodox part of your brain go, oh, we shouldn't be messing with this? Or have you kind of asked that part of yourself to go sit in a corner and observe and enjoy?
So yeah, but I think that actually messing with it doesn't need to mean changing any of the words or even any of the tunes, right? For me, it feels like I might bring it back to that four worlds
Yeah,
framework that we mentioned, but maybe just to explain it in a few more words, which
please.
also is connected. It's the framework of the Tu B'Shvat Seder. So if we want to also
Mm-hmm.
tie it into there, we can. There's the Kabbalistic four worlds that are connected to the four elements, the four letters of the divine name, the four seasons. They map onto lots of different fours. But I think of them in a baseline way as the world of the body, how we exist in our physical being, the world of the heart, our emotions, the world of the head, our thoughts, our contemplative capacities, and our soul, or maybe more spiritual or mysterious aspects that are beyond all of those. And they work together. One of the metaphors is they're a ladder, that when we're connected in our bodies, we can open up our hearts, that can open up our ways of thinking, and that can open up our spirits and souls.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
There's so much to talk about, but let's talk about Tu B'Shvat, because it's that time of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a great affinity to Earth-based Judaism and eco-spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Me too.
Yeah, and I'm going out to Lethbridge to give a talk at the university in Lethbridge, about the climate crisis as a spiritual crisis. That there's the sacredness of the relationship we have to the world and to each other and to the cosmology is broken. That we're just not. We have no starscape to look up to. We have no sense of the totality and the smallness in the same moment of who we are. So when it comes to things like that, in your ideas of what your rabbinical world will be, where does that land, that kind of earth-based Judaism?
It also is an important part of my emerging understanding of Judaism, which I think I also entered my rabbinic studies being like, oh, that's something that we just do. That's a little side piece, right? There's some people that like to talk about the ecology, or maybe we only bring it up on Tu B'Shvat and we think about nature at our Tu B'Shvat Seder. And some people like to do that, but they're like kind of, that's just their thing that those people are interested in. And I think I really have come to understand that it's part of an essential part of Judaism, the connection with the natural world and this earth-based tradition is what Judaism is. And when we put it aside, we're actually losing part of the essential heart of what Judaism is about. And I have been discovering that and feeling ways in which Judaism connects me to the world, the natural world, is the same and feels like it is connected to how Judaism connects me to God, to my people. It has, it's a really important doorway in, and when we shut it, there's something that's missing. And it's an interesting piece because there are both aspects that, like just need dusting off that we're already doing, and there's new approaches, like maybe thinking about eco-kashrut, we can talk about. And there's also reclamation. There's things that maybe we've put off to the side and we can bring back. Okay, so those are all those things. Like there are ways of thinking in Judaism that are just connected to the fact that our ancestors were involved with the earth. We feel it in the Torah a little bit, right? That our ancestors were farmers and the holidays are agricultural.
Yeah.
And actually to understand how it's working, there was a deep connection to how things grew, what supported the land.
How to treat the land, how to have a year every seventh year where your fields are fallow, but you can even use it, I think, as metaphors in the personal development of a person in Shabbat. You have the idea of being fallow for that day. You just take your foot off the gas, basically, and just become a person. But But there's also
Mhm.
the worry that you're ghettoizing spirituality into one day, and then the rest of the week you go back to, moral relativism and ethical ping pong and all those other things, inappropriate
Right,
things.
but the wisdom that I feel in what you're saying, Ralph, is right. Even that jumping off, being like, oh, there's the 7-year Shemitah cycle that was about letting fields lie fallow, and there's this 7-day Shabbat cycle that we have as well. And right, even just noticing those patterns, right, that our ancestors noticed patterns, because that's how the natural world works, right? And we live in such a built-up environment that things are sometimes harder to see, but right, just this way of, right, those cycles of 7 working on different scales is like an essential part of Judaism. And things work on scales in this fractal way in nature too, that the pattern of a leaf is mirrored in the pattern of a branch, which is mirrored in the pattern of the tree itself. If we look to nature, we can see those sort of patterns. And I think it's embedded in our tradition, right? The 7 days,
Yeah.
the 7 months, the 7 weeks of the Omer, it exists on all these scales.
And and beautifully said. And the tree, becomes for the renewal in the Marcia Prager Siddur and Arthur Waskow and people like that. They talk about the tree as the tree gives, I breathe life into the tree and the tree breathes life into me, which is a scientific fact.
Mm-hmm.
But that whole idea of connectedness and sacredness in the relationship is what I worry about the most, because I feel we've become arrogant. We are God. I don't care if it's 42 degrees Celsius outside. I've got air conditioning. I don't care if it's 40 below. I've got heating. I can get in my car and not feel anything around me. I can walk a street in a city with street lights and not see more than 3 stars, and one of them is a jet. So I worry. And Tu B'Shvat, tell people what a Tu B'Shvat Seder would look like for you.
So a Tu B'Shvat Seder is a ritual that was created by the Kabbalists, the mystics in Sat, where they would eat a lot of fruit connected to the rabbinic original source of Tu B'Shvat is kind of just as a tax holiday for the trees, just noting when would you start to count the time that a tree was born, so to speak, to be able to figure out how much you might need to tithe from the tree. It didn't really have any like ritual components to it, but it was something about the trees, and the mystics loved the image of the tree for many reasons, and there was symbolic pieces brought into different kinds of fruits of the tree. He identified 4 different aspects of shells and seeds of inner and outer, which also connect to metaphorical understandings of our inner and outer worlds. And they would have a ceremony or a service, a ritual that involved 4 sections connected to the 4 worlds that we spoke about, involving 4 cups of wine, similar to the Seder on Passover, that touched on these 4 worlds and had a connection with these 4 different kinds of fruits that allowed for contemplative connection.
Nice. Renewal, in essence, is in some ways a marriage of Hasidic Judaism, the non-rational, mystical kind of whirling dervish version of being a Jew, and then you have on the other side of it, almost like a counterbalance to the Hasidic, is the non-duality of Eastern thought. For me, is that there isn't some God out there and some I'm of the David Cooper God is a verb school of thought, which is that this is what Godding is just to be play, in my case, playing hand drums and having people play guitars, but also bringing new energy and movement of the body and things like that, things that we don't do because now it's turned into, for me, and I have friends who are rabbis in the conventional sense, but even they talk to me about the sort of lack of enthusiasm that they're seeing in their congregations, that people come and sit and listen and get up, sit down, get up, sit down, sing, don't sing, let them sing for me, get up, sit down. So it's exciting when you see people in motion and engaged and playing that music together. There's something wonderful about it for me. So are you going for that kind of animated experience for people?
In short, yes. We're going for an animated experience.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And we're actually doing something a little bit different each week. We're trying different things out.
Right.
So each week there's a different flavor and way that's happening. So this past Shabbat, we did have a few people playing instruments. So it was more of that. The previous Shabbat, we didn't have, I think we had one guitar, but it was more based around discussion. So there's a different mode of getting into things. So we do different things. This past Shabbat, right, the more embodied piece, we had a meditation of the 10 sefirot, the 10 energy centers, that are also known as the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life. So we did a visualization of the tree of life in our bodies, connecting ourselves to the trees, thinking about Tu B'Shvat. But the week before, or the last time we did Renewal Shabbat, we did an embodied prayer where everybody shared a prayer and a gesture. And then we turned those gestures into a prayerful dance, which is
Nice.
animating it in a different way. Another time we just had like a dance, but we put on music and just had a dance party in the middle of the service to try to get things. So we're trying different things. With the goal of animating.
Mostly young people?
Mostly young people.
Yeah. I mean, I go to a Jewish men's retreat every year where most of us are older, and we do the same things. There's guys who get up and start dancing, and we play tons of music. Reb Sean and Reb Mark Biller, we do this stuff, and it just. I took one of my sons once, and I said, "Look, there's going to be people getting up and dancing and stuff like that. You don't have to get up and dance. It's not like there's a right way to do this and a wrong way." And so, we did the Kabbalat service, which Reb Sean leads. And at the end, I said to my son, I said, "So what'd you think?" He goes, "That was nuts." I said, "Good nuts or bad nuts?" He said, "No, good nuts. That's the first time I felt alive in a synagogue service and not thinking, am I doing this right? I just had a great time." So that's a good thing.
But to your point, there is also it hasn't taken roots in Toronto fully, right? I still know that there is, even in these services where people are coming open to trying different things, there still is a bit of a shyness or a reluctance to get up and dance. Way.
That's a big thing to ask of people.
Yeah.
It'll be the trick for you. It'll be how to orchestrate or situate people in a way that they feel safe letting go, to open up their hearts, because they can stay in their head and not use their body. And yet, if you ask them if prayer means anything to a lot of people in churches, in mosques, all over the world, they'll say, I know I'm supposed to be connecting to something, but I'm not. I'm just going through the paces. So it's a real challenge.
Yeah, and maybe also, or if we should succeed in getting that energy, I think also for teachers like Reb Shefa, who you mentioned, I think there is also an understanding of what are we bringing this energy towards? For what? To be ecstatic just for the sake of being ecstatic is not what we're trying to do. And I think there is a certain kind of danger that maybe people are right to be wary of. And I think that we need to, in trying to create this sort of approach to davening, to be clear that we're trying to raise the energy to be able to refine it, right? Bring us closer to something that is deep and meaningful and essential, not just letting it go for the sake of having fun. Right? There's something that we're trying to get to.
Yeah. Well, Rabbi, it's been wonderful speaking with you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I know you and I will be talking more in the future. So,
Looking forward to it. Glad for the chats today.
Rabbi Aaron Rotenberg is a Jewish Renewal rabbi,
Mhm.
recently minted, and I'm excited for what you're going to be able to do. And I hope people get in touch with you to see if they can connect as well. I'm Ralph Benmergui. This is Not That Kind of Rabbi. And if you want to get in touch with me, it's ralphbenmergui.ca. So you want to get in touch with me, please do. And please listen to all the CJN podcasts. We have a bevy of podcast opportunities for you to indulge in. In the meantime, you take care of each other. Have a good Tu B'Shvat. Go hug a tree. I know it's cold, but the tree's warm, trust me. If you look at the bottom, you'll see that there's a little ring where there's no snow. That's the heat generated from the tree. So, Eitz Chaim, folks, Eitz Chaim. Have a good one. Talk soon.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.